Encounter in Mexico that I will never forget. My friends and I needed a holiday, and we decided to go to Mexico for a week. There were 4 girls and 5 guys that were due to go. I typically thought of tequila and chill, the 2 best things in my book. We spent all of our cash that we had, and in the end we had to use our cards as backup. No biggie, but we didn't plan for it. So we go to a bar and started a tab behind it, and gave them my card to keep until I paid. We did so to kinda stop ourselves from forgetting to pay for the drinks. To sum it up, we did have enough money for the holiday. We got to the bar at around 7 o'clock, and we were just drinking, having fun at the time. Then the screams happened. We were at a bar that had a road behind it that backed into the woods. Everyone in the bar heard the screams, but they didn't react like we did. Me and my friend stopped drinking and were like, what the hell is that noise? We looked around and the other people were just casually sipping their drinks. The owner of the bar screamed something in Mexican to the other workers, and straight away they were at the windows pulling the curtains over all the ones in the bar. The owner even dimmed the lights and ran to double lock the doors. I kid you guys not, it was like watching something out of a film. The other people in the bar weren't reacting to it, and just shrugged it off like it was a daily thing. My friends and I were just staring at each other, mouthing profanities. Everyone was quiet, so we took it as we had to be as well. The owner was at the bar and had his hand on the counter, gripping a shotgun and staring at the door. My friends got up and walked over to the bar and asked the owner what was going on. Jake literally got up out of his seat and looked at the owner. The owner put his hands out to Jake and mouthed for him to sit back down. Without knowing what else to do, Jake sat back down. Then the noises started again. It sounded like someone was being torn, limb from limb, and letting out the most piercing, agonizing scream that I have ever heard in my entire life. It would scream and then make a high-pitched animal scream straight away. I'm sorry, I can't describe it any better, but it sounded like it was making these 2 noises at the same time. The hair on my neck stood up, and I started getting goosebumps. The noise seemed to start at the back of the bar, and you could tell it was moving. It made its way outside the windows, and it was at the door. I am 100% silently freaking out by this time. The noises are right outside the door, and they're not moving. I look around, and I see everyone in the bar was now frozen, just staring at the door apart from the owner, with his hand still on his gun. 2 loud thuds at the door. It sounded like it was slamming itself against the door and still making this awful noise. No one inside moved, scratching at the door now. Silence inside. After what seemed like an hour, maybe half an hour, we started to hear the screams slowly drift back into the forest. People started talking again, and I for sure didn't want to stay at that pub after that. I jumped up and ran over to the bar and said that I wanted to pay for my drinks. The owner didn't have a problem with that, but said, "You and your friends can have the drinks on me if you promise to stay the night. The bar will be open." What the hell is this guy talking about, I thought. Stay here. I told him I'm sorry, we have already got a hotel booked and it's only a short walk away. I'm now nervously glaring at my friends and a please come over and help me way. The man replied, "No, you don't understand. If you go outside, it will get you. Free drinks, and in the morning you can go." To put it blunt, he was very convincing. So we stayed, and in all fairness, it was a really good night. We had free drinks, played some drinking games. Oh, we didn't sleep, but in the morning we made it back to the hotel, where we just crashed out. I mean, seriously. What the hell, right? My mother saw La Llorona in Mexico when she was 15. Alright, so this story has been told to me by my mother a few times. And every single time I still get that creepy, eerie feeling that someone is watching me. My mother is from a small town in Mexico, located in Zacatecas. When she was around 14, she had the habit of waking her mother up to go to the restroom, since it was an older home and the restroom was located outside. My mother tells me that it was around 3 a.m. when she woke up and felt the need to use the restroom urgently. She began calling out for her mother. After a while, her mother not responding, she began getting agitated and started screaming. At this point, my mum turns around, and at the foot of the bed, she sees her mum standing there. She was wearing a white robe, but had a very bleak expression on her face, and both of her arms were extended. My mum said she suddenly felt extremely cold and a huge sense of dread. She had never seen her mum wear a white robe. That's when she looked down and saw her mum's feet weren't touching the floor. At that moment she screamed and quickly threw the covers over her head. Her mother, wearing something completely different, runs in to find my mother shaking in her bed. Nobody believed my mother. Everybody told her that it was a dream, until a few days later there was a power outage. During this, my mother and a few of her siblings were with her parents, and they all decided to sleep in the living room. At around the same time, at about 3 a.m., they heard the same undeniable wails of La Llorona down the street. None of them slept that night. My time in Mexico. In the summer of 2014, me, my older sister, and older cousin took a trip to Mexico to visit our family. They lived in a small ranch-like town. No official name, no paved roads, just dirt trails leading to other homes and a very small candy store. Typical Mexican households are one-floor homes, and my grandpa's house, where we were staying, was more of a one long hallway with about 4 doors, all on the left side, while the other side was sliding doors that go outside. It wasn't small by any means. All the way down was the door that led to the bathroom, while straight ahead of it was an open kitchen. Me, my sister, and my cousin stayed in one of the rooms, the third door to be exact. It was my little cousin's room, who offered it to us and left to sleep at his aunt's house for the remainder of our stay. It wasn't a lot to get used to, except when the night came. It was so dark, not being able to see your hands in front of your face was something I never got used to. Anyway, being in the middle of nowhere, it was hard to get internet, especially when everybody is trying to catch a signal. So in the night it seemed a lot faster, or maybe we just had a lot more patience. We'd watch anime episodes on YouTube for hours into the night. Our family who greeted us had to leave to Tijuana to fix some papers in order to come to America. It left us 3 with my grandpa. We continued our small routine, we developed, and the night fell again. Me and my sister were huddled up watching the episodes while our cousin slept soundly in the bed next to us. We were used to little insects of the night coming in and making sounds, but we started to hear something else. It sounded larger and far away. My sister paused the episode and we started to stare at the ceiling, trying to focus our hearing on whatever it was. It sounded like sliding, like sandals on tile, sliding vigorously back and forth. We made eye contact as we heard the sliding get closer and eventually fade away, as if they were sliding from one end to the other. My heart felt like it was going to explode. We're not naive to what lies out there in the mountains or what kind of visitors we could encounter if we had bad luck. My sister shrugged it off and said to continue the episode anyway. Weeks went by and the sliding never missed a night. We decided not to tell our cousin, as she scares too easily. The idea was to keep her calm. After letting her know my grandpa was a very old man, we thought that this was the last thing he needed as a man just trying to enjoy his chickens and turkeys. Then came that night. We continued our episode and the sliding started. I never really paid attention to what time it was when I started hearing it, but I didn't think it ever came on at an exact time. The sliding seemed to be faster until we heard it stop at our door. My sister stopped the episode and I got close as I could with her. I kept asking her if she heard that. It stopped at our door, but she continued to shush me and tell me it was nothing. I felt fear to my core and frustration to her denying it was anything out of the norm. Then we started to hear the sliding in the room. My sister quickly pulled the bed sheets over us and laid flat. We hear the soft impact of our shoes being slightly pushed aside. My sister continued to put her fingers to her lips to shush me, as I do my best not to say anything at all. Her eyes looked wide and focused on hearing where it was in the room. No other noise except my cousin snoring slightly could be heard. Then we hear it almost start rummaging through the things on the floor, and then we hear the sliding become muffled like it left the room. We hear it fade away into what sounded like the kitchen and then back up to the bathroom. My sister doesn't pull the covers off, but she tells me to go to sleep now. I ask what it could even be, saying only 4 of us are here, and the crack under the door can only fit about a spider or maybe a cricket underneath it. I can feel her frustration when she tells me to shut up and go to sleep. Today, we talk about it more confidently. I know she was just trying to keep me calm, to keep herself calm. We never heard it again after that night, and we told our cousin about it when we went to another city to visit more family, and she thanked us for not telling her, as she definitely would have freaked out. We never really knew what it was. The door never moved. It's a heavy piece of wood that needed more than one can of WD-40 to even quiet down a little. My grandfather was a 75-year-old man who went to bed at 7 to 8 p.m. to wake up at 4 a.m. to pray every day, so neither of us think it was him. The sliding never made any other sound to even give off what it was. Thinking it over, it couldn't have been a chicken or any other animal either way. The crack under the door is nowhere big enough to fit anything besides maybe, as I said earlier, a cricket or a spider. Crickets have made their way into the room, but there is a high doubt that anything that can be heavy enough to make a loud sliding noise would be able to fit under the crack of that door and still be large enough to rummage through our items. We never really found out what it was, and we were scared to look out at the bed sheet at any time to see something. Either way, every time our family gets to telling our scary experiences, this is one that always gets brought up by us. I always wanted to share them on the internet, so hopefully this group is okay with seeing more of them. La Llorona in Mexico. I'm sure several people have heard of La Llorona, the woman that walks and cries super loud at like 1 to 3 a.m. You can hear her mostly found in Mexico, in the ranch where my mother grew up. There was a video of her because La Marina, aka the Marines, were protecting from narcos, and when they were there patrolling, they were looking around at night when all of a sudden she just pops up, walking and crying. That the Marines were even trying to leave as quickly as possible, and some were even screaming. There was a video that my family members had, but that was like a couple of months ago, and they said that they haven't been able to find it again. And they even said that you could see her super clearly when she walked past the lamp, and it looked like a woman in all white just floating, roaming through the streets. Another witch story from Mexico. My uncle's wife told me this story. She's from a small town next to our town in Mexico. She said that one night past midnight, for some reason, she looked out the window in her room and she saw something flying by and made eye contact with it. She came to realize it was a witch, so she panicked and closed the curtains and tried to go back to sleep. She said she usually woke up at 6 a.m. to go to this house where they had a corn mill, so she could make handmade tortillas. It's a tradition. When she woke up, she said her head was sticking out of the window. Their windows had metal bars and her head was sticking out. She believes that the witch she saw tried to take her, but the only thing that stopped her from being removed and held her back was those metal bars. I do have more stories from Mexico. I'll gather them and share them here. This story is about my grandpa. The town my grandpa is from has parties every year around Christmas. Well, one time my grandfather was drinking heavily and decided to go outside with a friend of his. Once they were outside, my grandpa noticed a lady dressed in all white standing just ahead of them. Now remember, my grandpa and his friends were completely drunk at this point. They were so drunk to the point they could barely walk straight. Anyways, the lady told my grandfather and his friend to follow her, but the friend stayed behind. She started to make her way through a forest and my grandfather kept hearing her voice, so he kept following her. After minutes and minutes of walking, the ground went straight down, like a canyon, but my grandpa noticed that the lady kept walking as if the ground was still there. At this point, he noticed that there was something very wrong, and he had snapped out of his drunken state that he was in. He said he then ran back as fast as he could, and was in shock for quite a while. I have a witch story from Mexico. It happened to my dad when he was younger. He and some friends decided to go camping. I forget where he said that they went, but it was in the mountains outside of Mexico City. They stopped in a small town for supplies and then headed up the mountain. They set up their campsite and started a fire. That is when their friends took out a bottle of tequila that he had swiped from his parents. It was, according to him, to help them stay warm on a cold night. As they sat there by the fire, they started to see something strange. They saw some strange lights in the other mountains. They were not cars because they were traveling up and down the mountain, and it's not as if they were following a road. They were too low to be planes. My dad and his friends watched for a while, then things got scary. Everything went pitch black, even with the campfire. My father said he could barely see in front of him. Then they were gripped by an overwhelming sense of fear, a panic like they had never felt before. One of his friends grabbed a couple of sticks and fashioned a crucifix out of them. They all gathered around and started praying, before finishing off the tequila and passing out. In the morning, they decided to leave for home. They stopped at the small town for breakfast and began to tell the locals about what they had seen. One of the locals told them that they had been around witches. Witches were known to be in the area. The lights were meant to distract them. The further they were away from them, the closer the witches were. The fear that they felt was meant to disorient them, make them easy prey. They were told that they were lucky to have made it out and back to the village alive. A ghost photobombed a family picture in a restaurant in Mexico. The picture was taken in a restaurant in Mexico, and it was supposed to be just me and my family gathering. In the background, there is a girl that my friend who is in the picture says wasn't there in person. It seemed to be a girl from maybe the 17th or 18th century, wearing old-style clothes, holding a candle. She has a cross on her forehead and stitches on her lips, with her eyes pure white. According to the local history of the town, many people used to be buried like that centuries ago. The picture went viral in Mexico, but didn't find it here. I wanted to share it to see your opinion. My times in Mexico, crying in the middle of a field. I was born in the USA, but used to visit Mexico often, pre-COVID. Probably twice a year as a kid, and once a year when I started living on my own. This was my first experience when I went out. I was around 9. If you're not aware, some places in Mexico are enchanted or plain out haunted. I was staying with my uncle at the time in the country meaning a lot of houses do not have electricity and the nights can be or get pitch black. Even though my life was padded in the US, it was still neat to see how my uncle lived. My mum and siblings came, but I chose to stay with my uncle that time because I was close to them. They owned a farm that was in the middle of nowhere. They had electricity, but would try not to use it. They had a barn, a huge cornfield, and I remember this day like it was yesterday. I helped my uncle do the chores around the farm, feed the animals mainly, while he did the heavier work. We went inside before sundown, ate and went to bed. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and checking my wristwatch. It was almost 3 a.m. I don't know what woke me up, but I looked around and saw a shadow figure by my window, looking out. Now I'm shitting bricks and quietly call out to my uncle. We were sleeping in the same room. He shushed me quickly. I stopped talking and it went eerily quiet. Not a bug or a bird could be heard making a noise. And that's when I heard it. It sounded like a baby crying, but it sounded very far away. It gave me chills. He went to get his brother, my other uncle. He told me to come on and grabbed his shotgun and his dog. He told me to hold a flashlight and to hold his dog's leash, and we went outside to see where the crying was coming from. We waited, and we heard the crying coming from the cornfield. I looked at my uncles, and they both looked scared. They decided to go investigate and brought me along. I was terrified the further we went into that cornfield. They originally thought it was a fox or coyote, but they said they knew what the sound was, and that they said that it sounded like a human child. Now we were hearing the crying constantly. Every time we went further in, the crying would sound further and further away. This field was huge. So we were maybe a quarter mile in, and my older uncle said he felt something in his gut. He felt that something was wrong and that we needed to get out of here immediately. He said to run with the dog and the dog will lead you home, but to shine the flashlight behind you so then that they could follow you. As soon as I took off on the run, the crying got louder. Super loud, and it sounded so close. I ran, and I reached the farm pretty fast. My uncles did too, and we got inside and boarded up the house. They stayed up until sunrise. I asked them what it was, and my uncle stammered and said he didn't know, but something was trying to lure us in there. Now, I do have other stories, other experiences that I've had from my few times that I've been in Mexico. And other people, like my mother and brothers, have also told me stories. So, if you want to hear some, just let me know. I went to visit my family in Mexico and had a horrible time sleeping with no fan. I woke up once too in the middle of the night, so hot that my ears were ringing from the silence. I decided to go sit at the stoop that they had leading outside. The entryway was covered only with a curtain. I looked up for some reason, and I shit you not, I saw a man standing in the fucking tree, wearing a sombrero and boots. I could even make out the spurs on his boots. He wasn't looking at me, but seemed to be looking straight ahead. I didn't wait much longer to take down the details. I booked it right back inside. In all fairness, the ghosts of Mexico's don't fuck around, man. Dad saw a witch as a teen in Mexico. My dad tells me this story from time to time. He's not the type to bullshit and is especially convinced he knows what he saw as a teen. Well, on his way to work, he was around 19 to 20 years old at the time, he was in a van with 3 other people. The drive was through a road high in the mountains with little to no civilization at all. This was an everyday thing to him, so nothing was new. However, one day, to work around 9 or 10 a.m., he claims to have seen a witch flying in the mountains. Yes, this might seem silly, but it was like your stereotypical witch. An old lady wearing a hood and flying on a stick. He quickly told his co-workers, and he says that everyone saw it. If you search up Bruja de Montre, that's the most accurate way to describe what my father saw. He says this is not a UFO, as you can tell it was humanoid, that it was a humanoid figure and quickly disappeared as it flew over the mountains. I would ask his old co-workers if the story is true, but he has lost contact with them ever since he moved to the United States. In the area where my parents grew up, it was believed that witches were very, active, and many similar sightings of them were reported. Again, my dad is not the type to bullshit, and there's no real reason for him to lie to me about this, so I'm going to choose to believe him. Kia ora. You made it to the end of another video, and on a Thursday. You know what that means, right? You are 1 day away from an average weekend. Unless, of course, you work on the weekend, as I said yesterday. But that's not the point. What is the point is you have made it. And you have also made it into another beautiful day, which is something you should take away and be happy about. Because we only get so many, right? Anyway, thank you all for making it this far. Sorry about my little preacher moment there. I do hope that you are all enjoying my videos. If you are, please like and subscribe, do all the usual things, tick on all of the comments, etc. And, well, let's not drag it out too long. If you want to see some more of my videos because you've liked the one you've watched today, there's going to be some appearing on the screen. I'll have a playlist there and a couple of more interesting and scary stories that you may be interested in watching. But anyway, I've said anyway 18 times already, so let's stop it here. Have yourself a good night or day wherever you are. Remember to be safe, and as always, I am Grim, and I'm, well, signing off. Adios, amigos.